He also defended the faith against heretics, which at this time was not easy. Remember, we're coming right out of the Council of Nicaea in 325, condemning Arianism. One could condemn it, but it's still around. Okay, so you still have to combat it. Now, once again, like I said, we have to paint this man as a very real person. One major flaw was his anti-Jewish sentiments in his talks and writings. Some scholars say that he was just reflecting the general attitude of Antioch at this time. Others go back to an incident in his youth when a major government building caught on fire and the Christians were blamed for it. Some of his friends and mentors were tortured as a result of this. They say that he carried the scar from this for the rest of his life. However, his virtues and good deeds certainly outweigh anything that were his transgressions. But just a little sample of this, if I mark the page right. Okay, here's John Chrysostom on the Jews. First of all, we must always keep in mind the historical and social settings. Remember, there was a time in our country when slavery was perfectly acceptable and considered a normal part of daily life. In fact, it was even practiced by the church. Mount St. Mary's, the oldest Catholic seminary in America, was partially built with slave labor. So we have to be honest about it. So I'm not making excuses for John Chrysostom's anti-Jewish tirades or the Catholic Church's participation in slavery. I just want you to say it's not fair to judge with 21st century minds what happened back then, okay? All right, so here is Chrysostom. The Jews are inveterate murderers, destroyers, men possessed by the devil. Debauchery and drunkenness have given them the manners of pigs and lusty goats. They know only one thing: to satisfy their gullets, get drunk, to kill and maim one another. They murder their own offspring and immolate them as them to the devil. The Jewish disease must be guarded against. The Christian's duty is to hate the Jews. End quote. Another quote. The Jews are the most worthless of men. They are perfidious murderers of Christ. The Jews are the odious assassins of Christ, and for killing God there is no expiation possible, no indulgence or pardon. God always hated the Jews. It is incumbent upon all Christians to hate the Jews. End quote. So, there is a book by Robert Walken called John Chrysostom and the Jews, Rhetoric and Reality in the Late 4th Century. I call that to your attention if you want to pursue this area of his life a little more, because I think he does give it a pretty fair balance. In 398, the Archbishop of Constantinople died. Now, John's fame and reputation certainly were well known. The emperor and empress wanted him to be the next bishop of the imperial city, but they knew how he resisted other ordinations, so they feared that the people what they might do publicly if they took their beloved priest and teacher away from them. So what they did, they extended an invitation to him to visit Constantinople, but his escorts, in fact, were kidnappers. They kidnapped him, took him to Constantinople, and under imperial order was commanded to be the next bishop, an appointment he did not want. Now you have to keep in mind in history, you have a map in front of you. Yeah, the other side? And the other side. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, where it says about 300. All that dark part was the Roman Empire. Now, we're so used to thinking of, well, Rome is here and Byzantium is there. Remember that that's a later historical construct. Because when Constantine moved the capital from Rome to Byzantium, and then of course renamed it after himself, Constantinople, that was the moving of the Roman Empire to the east. It was still called the Roman Empire. So we understand the terminology. So you see that dark part, that's an awful lot of area. Okay? So at this time, and then if you look at the other side of the map, the cities of Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople were in a political fight for power and prestige among each other. So if this is what happening on a secular level, guess what was happening on a church level? The bishop or patriarch of Alexandria in Egypt, by the name of Theophilus of Alexandria, he was very jealous, hot-headed, money-hungry, devious, and warlike, and those were his charms. He did not want to ordain an Antiochian as bishop of the capital of the empire. However, one of the spies of the empress, the Byzantine empress, Eudoxia, had a lot of dirt on Theophilus, this guy from Alexandria, and threatened to go public with it if he did not go ahead and ordain John Chrysostom as the Archbishop of Constantinople. So Theophilus gave in, but boy did he carry a grudge for the rest of his life about doing this. The Bishop of Constantinople, before Chrysostom and his clergy, loved very lavish parties, banquets, and high spending. And during his time as Archbishop, John adamantly refused to host any of these social gatherings in the high style that they liked. And prior to John coming to Constantinople, monks were roaming the street, going to parties, going to bars, and he put an end to this and ordered them back to the monasteries and to a stricter observance to their monastic rule. Well, needless to say, John is not making friends. Then he also started preaching that the wealthy widows should not decorate themselves, but should be more concerned with the poor. He's earning the anger of many clergy, monks, and wealthy widows, but the common people loved him and revered him. He was preaching to wealthy widows when he managed to gain the anger of a very superstitious empress. Now, Empress Eudoxia of the empire, she was a real piece of work. She started to assume that his denunciations of extravagance in feminine dress were aimed at herself, and she started taking it personally. Now, also remember that this Bishop Theophilus of Alexandria is still in the background, resenting John's ordination in the first place, and so the enemies start adding up against John Chrysostom. Then something else happened. There were 4 heretical monks in Alexandria, and they were called the Tall Brothers because of their size. They were tall. Theophilus excommunicated them. They fled to Constantinople in order to plead their case. Now, Chrysostom gave them lodging, but nothing more. He did not take their side because of their heresy. But Theophilus thought that Chrysostom was not respecting the excommunication that he levied on the monks, and he became even more furious with Chrysostom. So an alliance was soon formed between Empress Eudoxia, this bishop or patriarch Theophilus, clergy, monks, and the wealthy widows. Okay, you're getting a pretty powerful group. Now this resulted in him being deposed and banished. However, he was called back almost immediately as the people started to riot over his departure. But remember, I told you Eudoxia was very superstitious. There was an earthquake. And during this earthquake, Eudoxia took it as a sign of God's anger, and at the same time, now scholars disagree on what happened. Eudoxia either suffered a miscarriage or a stillborn baby. So one or the other. So after this, God's angry with us, call John back. But that peace between them was short-lived. A silver statue of Eudoxia, the empress, was erected. She had a silver statue erected, and she puts it right at the entrance of the cathedral. Well, John was not pleased. And of course, John, being one not to mince words, denounced it very openly and very publicly at the dedication ceremonies, and he spoke against her in very harsh terms. Once again, John Chrysostom was banished, this time to the Caucasus in Armenia. Well, riots literally broke out among the people. The military were called in. The military even pillaged and desecrated churches on Holy Saturday when baptisms were going on. One writer said that the waters of baptism turned red with blood. The cathedral, senate, and other buildings caught on fire, and the whole empire seemed devastated. Could you imagine? However, when he was going to his exile, to his journey to Armenia, it was very rough on Chrysostom. On September 14th, the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, he attends the liturgy at a shrine along his route to exile. After partaking in Holy Communion, he leaves the church, very tired and worn out, blessed himself and said, "Glory to God for all things." And on September 14th, 407, died at the age of 60.